What's up, y'all? It's Ty. In this video, we're going to be looking at the detailed analysis of Bron at his best. Now, look, I've watched Bron throughout his career, and is he the GOAT? I don't know if I could answer that question. I don't know. I think the GOAT is Wilt Chamberlain, but my thoughts on it are ever changing. I don't know. Bron has been the best player I've ever watched with my own two eyes, though. I'll say that.
The hardest thing to figure out about LeBron James at his peak might just be when exactly.
When is his peak? I think his second time in Cleveland was his peak, but I don't know.
LeBron hit another gear in the 2009 season, winning his first MVP and authoring one of the most incredible statistical profiles in NBA history. At 24, he had the perfect blend of youthful speed and explosive power.
He's so good still.
And in his second tour of Northeast Ohio, LeBron's offensive mastery
this is when I think he was at his peak
produced incredible playoff moments. And those seasons are great choices, but during those championship seasons in South Beach, his ability to do almost everything might have taken him to heights that no one has ever reached.
In Miami,
the most on-court
this series is fantastic. Again, if y'all haven't watched the rest of my videos on the greatest peaks, make sure to go do that, man. Make sure to go do it. MJ, Kobe, all.
For me, it could be compared to Michael, Magic, Kobe, all the ones that's making so success in the league. It's great, and I'm gonna just keep working hard, and someday it could be another one that could be compared to me.
From a distance,
LeBron knew, man. He knew.
LeBron just looked bigger and stronger than other players. But zoom in and there's way more going on. During those Miami years, his game was built around getting to the rim, and he approached the basket in just about every way imaginable. He drops his shoulder, goes off his left foot, and finishes southpaw here. But on this one, he dips the shoulder and jumps off 2 feet to float one in from short range. Here's another variant. He has a runway but springs into a jump stop, and fluid, adaptable athleticism was key to...
Did anybody think Carlos Boozer was going to get a stop? I certainly didn't.
LeBron's finishing prowess. Of course, his size was a huge factor too, crossing back to the left, and notice how quickly the ball gets to about 10 feet so he can release it away from those long Tim Duncan arms. LeBron's mass was arguably more important than his length, able to plow through contact from defenders. Jimmy Butler gives LeBron a pretty healthy push here, and unlike lankier
poor Jimmy, man,
penetrators, it barely derailed the L train, and he still has the balance to explode for the stuff. LeBron was probably the best ever at absorbing blows in midair while still powering up a good shot, which requires incredible body awareness and reactivity.
It's the thing, though. If you're going to foul him like that, you gotta prevent the
These reactions are automatic, subconscious movements. This contact blunts his vertical leap, so he adjusts by pulling the ball back and arching it over the defender. This
Gallinari guarding Bron
is unprecedented neurological wiring in such a giant explosive body. Here, he has the instinct to dip his shoulder in front of the defender, who bounces off LeBron as he organically twists into a layup. Some of this is just physics. A 275-pound body moving at high speeds packs quite a punch. Paul George goes flying here, and again, LeBron adjusts off his right leg and finishes with the left hand.
What are you supposed to do?
And yes, it was reported that James weighed in at 270-something pounds during these seasons.
270, still that fast, still that athletic, still that, under control.
Slightly heavier than the 250 to 260 he supposedly played at in Cleveland a few years prior, and that zapped some of his acceleration. In 2009, his first step was quicker, and his combination of speed and power were at video game levels. If we're submitting entries into the all-time highlight competition, this first MVP year is the version to nominate. But that additional explosiveness was offset by a weaker outside shot, a game that wasn't quite as refined, and somewhat paradoxically, he wasn't a definitively better finisher on his drives back then. This is because he developed so many ways to finish at the cup, from contorting reverses to little spin moves that finished with a soft push shot. LeBron was a master of tempo, of controlling speeds. Take this drive into Duncan, where slowing down is the key to creating space for a gentle finish.
His touch
Despite
is fantastic.
weighing more than Karl Malone, his agility and explosiveness were
Weighing more than Karl Malone is a crazy
still
way to put it.
guard-like. And with a screen, he was surgical, attacking the position of the second defender. He leans the wrong way here, so LeBron rejects the screen and explodes in a straight line. Yet on this one, he feels the defender too far left, so he builds momentum going around the pick, and then he's an unstoppable freight train, and that is just bionic strength and dexterity that would make Isaac
That was
Asimov
actually
proud.
pretty good D.
Oh yeah. There were more subtle tricks too. He knows Duncan waits to commit to a shot, so he up fakes on an explosive jump stop before stepping through for the layup. All of this made LeBron one of the best finishers ever. Among qualifying players, he has the highest field goal percentage season
Yo! 80%?
at the rim this century, and since he maintained comparable efficiencies in the playoffs, there's a great argument these are the best finishing seasons ever. These superpowers were only amplified in transition, where he could build ahead of steam and attack into open space.
It's just like there's nothing you can do to stop that unless you want to take a charge on somebody that's 280.
He just shed smaller players like they were mosquitoes.
Like, what is he supposed to do?
This
Nothing
is
you
the
can do.
Android upgrade of what we saw in episode 5 from Magic Johnson, out sprinting everyone and
He's so
changing
fast, too.
directions at high speeds while completely under control. Size and speed are one thing, but LeBron's ability to decelerate, remain controlled, and flow into a move supercharged his fast break scoring. He could use those same half-court tools, change of tempo, varied jumping angles, and so on, only with a head of steam against backpedaling defenses. Even with big men in the paint, LeBron could shift on the fly. He's angling toward the middle here, but then slides left for two.
You don't want to give it up to UD?
And there is a cerebral component to many of these. He throws a head fake to freeze a defender, and he's unstoppable with all that space to attack. Bron did this stuff to great defenders too. Andre Iguodala's hips are facing left here, so LeBron goes right. Then Andre recovers, so he gives him an inside out for the full spin cycle. In real time, the whole thing is a blur, and it's free throws. It was basically impossible to slow down James in transition, running alongside him or recovering
This
to
was
the
crazy.
paint because of his width and change of direction.
I mean, it's just like you've got no chance in transition to stop him. Like, what are you supposed to do?
Here,
It's
the
crazy.
defender is basically even with him, but since he's so much smaller, he's essentially poster decoration. In short, LeBron was the most devastating transition scorer the league had ever seen, and 2012 to 13 is the best two-year stretch in Synergy's database, averaging an insane 1.4 points per possession in transition on over 4 opportunities a game. Numbers he nearly replicated to a T in the
That's on Roy Hibbert too.
season.
I mean,
The totality of all this made LeBron one of the best scorers ever, with his playoff runs in Miami stacking up incredibly well against just about anybody in league history when adjusting for opponent quality. Another key to LeBron's scoring during these years was the development of his post game. These plays weren't nearly as deadly as his transition game or half-court drives, but adding some back-to-the-basket skills kept defenses honest and gave him another arrow in his
he
quiver.
loves that fade. He still shoots that.
He often caught it in the mid-post and went to work, backing down smaller wings, and
That's on
with his
Kawhi,
size
too.
advantage and great balance, he could wheel into shots down low or bust out that spin move that he loved. There's a Tim Duncan-esque use of the offhand to protect the ball against Kawhi Leonard. We often think of great scorers as having pretty fadeaways or nasty go-to moves, but LeBron's physical dominance and fantastic feel carved out hyper-efficient shots, and he balanced those shots with a respectable outside game. This was
Those
a shift
Thunder
from
jerseys were
in his
crazy.
younger years, where he was near the bottom of the league in outside shooting percentages, but in Miami, he jumped above league average on his long-range shots. Behind a slightly smoother shooting motion, LeBron was more patient getting into his jumper, and as a result, he made about 42% of his long twos in Miami, a step up from the 39% he made in his final 2 years
He's just
in
gotten continuously better at shooting the ball too.
Cleveland. He also improved by more than 3 percentage points from downtown after making only 34% of his threes between 2009
Okay, that's a crazy shot to shoot.
2011. So, during these seasons, LeBron's outside shot rounded out his incredible scoring game, but that was only half of his offensive equation because his playmaking talents helped take him to another level.
Facts. I mean, his passing is the best part of his game.
Baby, we can go anytime. You just let me know what's good for you.
You can't get through Detroit training in no pool. You think Michael trained in the pool? No, I don't think so.
And stop looking at my lemonade.
Here I come, cannonball!
Because LeBron was
commercial.
so effective driving to the hoop, defenses would counter by packing the paint, forcing him to beat them with his jumper. Dallas did this to some degree in the 2011 finals, not overreacting to him as a shooter, and then loading up on his drives. Tyson Chandler spies James instead of worrying about the weak side, and so two big men are waiting for him in the paint. When the Mavericks clogged these driving lanes like this, they were content with Mario Chalmers or Dwayne Wade beating them with outside shots. There was more to LeBron's huge scoring drop-off in that series than just Dallas's defense, but 2 years later, a fantastic Spurs team packed the paint again and made LeBron's driving gaps as narrow as possible. It was common for multiple Spurs players to converge on him in the lane, and this strategy limited LeBron's effectiveness more than any other series between 2012 and 14.
I mean, to me though, like this is common even in today's league. You've got to have guys that can make shots.
Although that improved jumper still made it a solid scoring series for James.
And then they got Ray Allen, Shane Battier.
And this is where a more diverse scoring arsenal made him so difficult to slow down, not only with outside shots, but by playing out of the post. Post play provided a different angle to attack from. Defenses couldn't really load up on any driving lanes in these spots, and because LeBron was such a gifted passer, it made doubling him down there a bit tricky. If teams weren't careful, a double team could create short, easy kickouts to three-point shooters.
You got Ray Allen and, Battier.
A huge part of LeBron's offensive value was unlocking long-range marksmen out on the perimeter. With the Spurs clogging the lane, LeBron sets up a rim finish, but it's really a pass. And crafty deliveries like this gave shooters optimal breathing room. If he didn't throw it early, he had the strength to skip it across the court.
Like, he's out there with Ray Allen, Mike Miller, and Mario Chalmers, man.
There was a longer recovery for
crazy
the defense.
the amount of shooters he had.
That's
out
just
there.
incredible speed from that position to beat the closeout. James might have been the best skip passer the league had ever seen, swinging it cross-court to his bandmates, and when teams tried to sit in his driving gaps, changing sides like this is a natural counter. Of course, LeBron also manipulated defenders. There's no indication he's passing as he turns the corner here, and the look away prevents this
such a good pass.
defender from playing the passing lane, and it's a clean shot. He could hit these same passes in transition against a wall of defenders. The velocity on that one buys the shooter more time, and again,
Jeez, Mike Miller
uses his drive to disguise a delivery.
What in the world was that?
That move sent Kevin Garnett in the wrong direction, giving Mario Chalmers all day to shoot.
To Chalmers.
That driving pressure and a powerful dribble took him right into the teeth of the defense, where he could spray
there's 5 Spurs in the paint.
around to wide open shooters. Miami shot 38% from downtown, with LeBron on the court in his final 3 seasons there,
'Cause it's shooting
surrounding him
practice.
with better three-point weapons and going to smaller, stretchier lineups. Unfortunately, their second best player, Dwayne Wade, was a poor three-point
That's what I'm
shooter.
saying. I don't know if I ever really, this fit just didn't, they obviously won, but it's like,
Which wasn't an ideal fit next to James.
it's just not an ideal
Wade
fit.
was
That's a good
coming
way to
off
put it.
one of the great peaks in league history himself, and in many ways was functionally similar to LeBron. He was a dangerous finisher and difficult to keep out of the lane, and he could spearhead an entire offense with a pick and roll game as well. In effect, this made him LeBron's backup because the Heat could flank James or Wade with identical lineups. But since neither of them were really good spot-up shooters, on possessions initiated by Wade, LeBron was less valuable standing in the corner. A good shooter just ends up with a high percentage three there instead. Even though Wade-centric possessions were perfectly effective, Miami's best offense was LeBron ball, giving him the keys and letting him make the primary decisions.
The bank shot there from Bosh is crazy.
Miami actually excelled when James played without his sidekick, logging over 40 games without Wade during these seasons at a 57-win pace.
It's ridiculous.
With Wade, they were only a touch better, reaching a 59-win pace. And most notably, the Heat's offensive efficiency was slightly better without Dwayne.
But yeah, he was a good defender.
Offense was good in the regular season and fantastic in the playoffs.
The
a
playoff
pattern that has held
offense
for
is
LeBron's
crazy.
entire prime, which is a testament to his scoring and playmaking.
I think that's gotta matter when you're talking about LeBron James. How he levels up in the playoffs has to matter.
Ability, making him the centerpiece of a heliocentric system with the right finishers orbiting around him, produced historically good offense because of his decision making. For instance, take this pop quiz. Where's the optimal pass?
Honestly, I don't think there's a wrong pass. What I would do if I'm Bron, snake the screen, get James Harden on your back, and then you have a 5-on-4 situation. That's what I would do. Then you got 2-on-1 on the backside. That's really where I'm looking. Just read the court. I think it depends. I need to see it. I need to see the next 0.5 seconds. Battier maybe right here. If you can sneak it to Battier.
Congratulations if you found it, because the Thunder were blindsided by that pass.
I mean, he threw it right at the time.
Reason.
I mean, the pocket pass is there for Bosh if he can catch it and finish it. That's a good play by Bosh, though.
We've seen him snap it to this corner if the strong side defender slides over, and if he feels the weak side defender leaning
LeBron's passing is just
the roll man,
immaculate.
he could fire it to the other wing for more target practice.
It's literally such an easy shot.
Some of these require elite reflexes, snapping off passes when an opening emerges, and here the roll man pops away from the hoop, and as LeBron looks for him, it takes a millisecond before he processes the cut to the basket and delivers a laser. Great passers not only deliver balls quickly, but they camouflage releases from a variety of angles. So when LeBron touched the paint, defenses had little indication of what was coming. A kick out to a shooter, a drop off to a big man, or a score. They basically all look the same until the moment the ball leaves his hands, and he usually chose the best option. All of this takes great spatial awareness.
I feel like Mario Chalmers is open so often and he just doesn't get the rock.
Tracking multiple defenders, so when one moves, he knows exactly where to attack.
No way. In the finals?
Great googly moogly.
That pass is insane, and that finish is
one
insane.
takes some grandmaster recognition, eyeing an angle with Tim Duncan's hands down, and throwing a rope the second his receiver gets inside position. Like all high-end passers, LeBron would try some into tight coverage that didn't pan out, and I think his vision and reads improved in later seasons. He almost never missed straightforward layups like this one, but he could...
I mean, James Jones for a three is literally just nearly as good.
Overlook some slightly trickier hookups. That's there for the taking, and we've seen post players hit this cutter a number of times during this series.
I don't mind that, though. Like a lot of times, and Thinking Basketball does this. Like I'm not saying that he's not missing guys, but if you're leading to a wide open three, I don't think you can be mad.
He also wasn't regularly tossing this lob pass to the roll man back then like he would in subsequent years, and sometimes his bounce passes could be a bit tough to handle for his big men.
Yeah, that is tough.
Still, that vision and quick processing led to some spectacular passes in dynamic situations. Chugging down the court here for a lob, and then yes, that is exactly what you think.
Look at like they're up to
pass
30?
Where he leaves the ball hanging right in front of the rim.
It's crazy.
Between his visual processing and that fluid athleticism, there were moments where he was almost bird-like with some passes.
I'm not gonna lie, this team would have been fun to actually like. I didn't like this team, but they would have been fun to like.
Able to anticipate openings and then snap off high-value dimes. In transition, he was a little Magic-like, pushing the pace with speed and forcing defenses to commit so he could drop it off. This is a three-man wall in the lane to barricade his penetration, and that leads to wide open threes, and here OKC forms a wall at an angle, which creates an alley that LeBron quickly spots for free throws. You might have noticed how many of these assists were to Wade. He and LeBron had really nice chemistry on cuts to the basket.
So I'm saying Wade and Bron did end up working because Bron made it work because of his passing.
And while Flash was still a great offensive player in those seasons, the more he receded into a secondary role, the better LeBron's numbers became. His shot creation estimates with Wade in the game were in the 93rd percentile historically in the playoffs, but with Wade on the bench, they would have ranked 8th all time, almost perfectly matching his earlier numbers in Cleveland. His free throw rates with Wade dipped to the 93rd percentile, but without him they would have ranked 7th all time, again fairly close to his numbers as a Cav. So, as a result,
LeBron was such a freak.
LeBron's scoring went to another stratosphere in those playoffs with his Slash brother on the bench, surpassing even Michael Jordan with what would be the best adjusted numbers in playoff history.
Ridiculous. And at a great efficiency, too.
That's not an entirely apples to apples comparison, but it's part of why the Heat offense was more efficient, playing a larger brand of LeBron ball. So while LeBron was the centerpiece of an incredibly effective attack, all of his athleticism and computational power helped on the other end of the court, where he was a key component in Miami's defense. During their 4-year run, the Heatles frequently attacked ball screens with a second defender, which meant other defenders had to scramble behind the play as everyone recovered. And this blitzing of the pick and roll created a kind of frenetic approach on defense that required a ton of coordinated rotations and also forced a lot of turnovers. Sometimes this scheme asked James to sprint across the court to a popping big man. This would be an impossible rotation if the screener flared to the three-point line, but LeBron was so fast in a straight line that he could arrive when these passes did. He had great awareness of on-ball threats, sliding over to help early here and choking off this pass, which leads to another turnover. In Cleveland, James's defensive success was more about brute force athleticism, but in Miami he played a more
such a freak, man.
Cerebral game. He isn't preoccupied with this cut because he knows a middle pick and roll is coming, and then he's big enough to battle with Duncan for the rebound. Here he needs to help on the roll man, but realizes he's in a pickle, leaving a wide open three or maybe a dunk, so he covers the pass while contesting the mid-range shot. He was an active communicator, calling out for a switch so his point guard could find a more natural matchup, then instantly pouncing on a breakdown to help influence a block from Shane Battier. LeBron's on a sharpshooter here, and he chases him off 2 screens for a decent look, and all that action pulled rebound.
I'm not gonna lie, Bron was bad on that possession.
Out of the paint, and it's a foul.
Look at Hansborough, Psycho T.
The next time down, LeBron tells Battier to take his man coming off the screen, switches to the big, and just blows the whole thing up. Because of his size, he could comfortably switch onto bigger players like this and guard them in isolation, and he could protect the rim like he was a big man as well.
Bron, when he's locked in because he's such a freak, I mean, he's such a good defender.
This wasn't the incredible paint protection we've seen from the great bigs in this series, but LeBron added a ton of value lurking in the lane, and since the Heat would often play small ball, he was the primary vertical presence in many of these situations. He was potent enough as a shot blocker to deter shots. Duncan freezes when he sees him here and then is totally stuck. And some of these were elite rejections that you would see from high-end defensive big men. He slides over here in case there's a laydown pass and covers so much ground that he spikes it. And this play is spectacular, coming from the corner after Wade whiffs on a gamble to kill a dunk.
It just makes it so hard because you think you have an easy layup, then you have to double clutch.
Now, he didn't have the same numbers as a shot-blocking big, so these plays weren't always the norm. Sometimes they could be fouls, and other times he wasn't quite as loaded up and vertical on some of these contests at the rim. But his timely rotations in the paint and this big man-like skill were a major asset for the Heat. There was a horizontal component to these rotations too. He has to cover about 16 feet in the second that this pass is airborne, and that prevents Steph Curry from firing and leads to a bad pass and a steal. He could play
Look at Draymond going for Norris Cole's knee,
cross-court pass like this, or explode to intercept a roll pass. And that
So
closing
quick,
speed
man.
allowed him to be in two places at once. These short little bursts of speed allowed him to cover tons of court like a rangy center fielder in baseball. And his hands were pretty good too, racking up enough steals to land in the 88th percentile historically. Some of these plays on the ball were certainly a bit risky, and so there were some occasional misses in there. On this one, he's in time on the rotation but lunges for more and comes up empty, and sometimes he'd sell out for a pick six, and when those plays failed, they often exposed the defense and led to a high-value shot.
I mean, I feel like that's worth it, though, if he gets that
But
steal,
he rarely
man.
lost track of the action off ball. Here's a lapse on some screening set, although he was usually pretty aware of his own man and the basketball from the other side of the court. So, despite a few hiccups, he was a fairly low-error player away from the ball. He was highly knowledgeable of opponents' playbooks during these seasons, helping early and rotating on point in Miami's scrambling scheme. And he was even known to call out opposing sets.
such good defense
He switches
rotation.
this to blow up Indiana's screening action.
But LeBron's IQ on both ends has
And his
always
pattern
been.
recognition skills were also a key to his defensive value. That value helped the Heat produce quality defensive ratings in the regular season and solid ones in the postseason. Among regular playoff teams, they were about middle of the pack in defensive performance
better or
during
worse.
these years, despite playing smaller lineups than most teams at the time. LeBron also loved rear-view blocks, recovering to catch players from behind. And this was part of his chase down arsenal in transition, where he just
His chase down blocks are
size
ridiculous.
up smaller
man.
players
It's
like an
ridiculous.
adult playing with young children.
Whoa,
he tried-
What in the Karl Malone?
Had a similar approach in the half court, although it was far less effective on drives like this when James lost a step to the dribbler. And containing ball handlers in space was probably his biggest defensive weakness. It wasn't that LeBron couldn't keep quicker or smaller players in front of him. He used his length and size to cut off angles well, but he also had to guess and react instantly to change directions on stops and starts. And he was vulnerable.
I mean, he played at what, 270?
These because at 270 pounds, it took a lot to break and re-accelerate in short spaces. His
Lou
technique
Will was
worked
so crafty.
really well whenever those little hops and reactions were on time and in the right direction. But if his feet were off the ground when his man started to go, he couldn't laterally recover at his size.
Prime PG was special.
This made LeBron an
He's
interesting on-ball defender because he regularly broke down to change of direction attacks, but when he sized it up well,
Evan Turner.
he could keep really small guards in front of him. He was fairly successful switched onto the shifty Tony Parker in the 2013 finals, and he was big enough to then switch onto Duncan and stonewall him in the post. Another downside to being
LeBron's so good at that in the post, like, getting a steal
big
like that.
was
It's
that
crazy.
navigating screens was a tricky endeavor. James didn't have that sharp cornering required to stick with some of these routes, and he couldn't really slide that much weight or rely on tap dancing feet to slip by some picks. You see him go wide here, so he can chase with more of a running motion versus sliding, and because he was so broad, he offered a large screening target, which made it challenging for him to stay with smaller players when they ran around like this.
I don't know why they
All
didn't
the
just
major
switch
one-number
it.
metrics view LeBron as a strong defender, and with his huge offensive value, his overall impact metrics are right at the top of the heap. Interestingly, these numbers were higher in his first 2 MVP seasons, when he was the lone star in Cleveland, surrounded by outside shooters.
I mean, it makes sense, though. Like, it makes sense. If you're surrounded by less talent, you're going to have a higher impact. It makes
to
sense.
attack the rim. In Miami, he didn't have the ball as much, and his off-ball impact paled in comparison to his on-ball game. He could hurt defenses with timely cuts. He had good instincts for when to backdoor a vulnerable
I mean, Bron's always been better
defender,
with the ball.
but his
It's just
spot-up
the
shooting
facts.
was only mediocre. And more importantly, playing away from the ball took the decision-making out of his hands. We've discussed scoring resiliency, but LeBron ball provided an overall resiliency that was difficult to scheme against because he could leverage his scoring and playmaking off of each other. He couldn't just plug into any offense and add the same value, but a well-constructed attack built around LeBron produced a championship-level offense. His high IQ, Swiss Army knife defense also made him one of the better perimeter defenders in league history, and that two-way impact probably made him greatest
Come on, man. This is ridiculous. With what he did defensively, this is ridiculous.
floor raiser we've ever seen.
This is ridiculous.
So, given that he has a great argument as a top 10 scorer and top 10 playmaker ever, it's easy to see why so many people consider LeBron James the greatest player of all time.
And this is at his peak. Now, here's what I'll say. I think Michael Jordan at his peak was probably maybe better than LeBron James at his peak. But I think LeBron being basically at that same peak over the course of 6-7 years, when he first left Cleveland, his Miami years, and then his Cleveland years again, is more impressive over a 5, 6, 7 year stretch than any other player we've seen. So, when you talk about MJ versus LeBron, I think there needs to be arguments for, are you talking about the best player at his peak or the best player throughout his career? I think there's two different players. If you're comparing those two, for two different arguments. That's my opinion on it. Watching Bron throughout his career has been so fun. And look, I don't like the Lakers at all. It's tough for me to root for them. But Bron against the Warriors were as fun as basketball as I've watched ever. Drop a like on the video, guys. Subscribe if you are new, and as always, man, I love you guys. Have a blessed day.